It is time now for the Scramble podcast alongside my podcast broadcast partner. I am Paul Hollingsworth along with Chris Flynn. He is in Long Lake, Quebec. I'm in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and we are joined today by Bill Scollard as our guest on this week's episode. Now, Bill, I pride myself on my memory, so I'm going to give your bio here in 30 seconds or less. You tell me if I have this right. Born and raised in Burlington, Ontario, came to St. Mary's University, played for the Huskies from 1985 to 1989. You were a starter all 5 years. You were a captain 4 of those years. You were an all-star, a CIAU All-Canadian. You played on 3 AUS championship teams. You were drafted by the Hamilton Tiger Cats, I believe, in the 8th round in 1988. And in 1988, when Chris Flynn was injured as the quarterback, instead of being a receiver and a punter and a kick returner, you were thrust into the quarterback position and you set a Vanier Cup record going 27 for 47, 296 yards passing. Do I have your bio correct?
That's the story.
That's a pretty good story. Well, everyone has a story. You should be proud of yours. Chris, I'll start it off. Look, I was joking before we started recording. Chris is in multiple halls of fame. Bill, you're in the St. Mary's Hall of Fame. I'm a mere mortal in your presence for the both of you guys, but I like hanging out with people with interesting stories. So, Bill, I'm interested in asking you a few questions. But Chris, since you were his iconic teammate and you guys made that great duo from a quarterback passing perspective back in those days, I'll let you start it off with Bill.
Okay. Bill, yes, it's great to see you again and great to have you on the show. It brings back memories just seeing you and hearing your voice again. And I have several questions for you, but my first question is, I know a question you've been asked before, but just for our viewers, just a simple question. How did you end up going to St. Mary's? I know you were playing junior football and stuff in Burlington. You may not even been playing at that time, or maybe had stopped for a year. I'm not sure, but just refresh us on just a quick story on how you ended up, arriving at St. Mary's.
Yeah, it was, as Paul said, everybody's got a story. I didn't play football till my last year of high school. I was a real shy kid, and I just didn't have sort of the courage to go out. I didn't think I was good enough to play anyway. And I had a science teacher at Burlington Central High School, Tony Gabriel's high school, actually, who saw me in the hallway and said, "You're coming up for the team." And I was too scared to say no, so I went out for the team. We were terrible. We didn't played 2 years of high school, didn't win a football game. I think we scored 3 touchdowns in 2 years. And then the only option, I went to Sheridan College for a couple of years. And the year I went there, they canceled the program. Bernie's Cusses was actually the coach, but they canceled the program. My only option was to play junior ball. So I played 2 years of junior ball and had some success there. But then after, I was too old to play junior ball anymore, and I was done. I was actually, my dad worked in the factory. I was going to go work in a factory back home and kind of get on with my life. And I got a call from Jerry Foster, who had been our kicker for a junior team the previous year, and he'd gone to St. Mary's. I'd never heard of St. Mary's. And he gave me a call, and my life was really not going anywhere. I was kind of stumbling a little bit and wasn't much of an academic, and so school didn't seem to be another option, and didn't really have any kind of working prospects. And Jerry called me up, Christmas, how you doing? Good. How you doing? How's St. Mary's? Good. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing nothing." And there was a lot behind that nothing. And he said, "Well, I was talking to Coach Utek, and he was wondering if there might be some interest in you coming out to Halifax." And I thought, "Oh man," right? I said, "Jerry, I'm slow, I'm small, right." But he said, "Well, give it some thought." So I got off the phone, and I called. I walked in to see into the living room where Mom and Dad were. And my dad was giving me a little bit of heat for kind of get on with your life sort of thing, right? And I was more scared than anything, thinking about I'd never been on an airplane before, much going to Halifax and university and the rest of it. And I mentioned to my mom who it was, Jerry, and how is he doing in Halifax. My mom's actually from this area. And then turned to Dad. Oh, and I said, Jerry was talking to Coach Utak, and he was interested in see if I wanted to come out there. And my mom said, "Well, it'd be kind of nice for you to see some of my family." And I turned to Dad, expecting him to shut the thing down, and that'd have been the end of it. And he said, "Do they have a football team? And do you think you can play for them?" Which was very unexpected. I said, "They do have a football team," and I don't know if I can play for them. And that started the wheels turning. Coach Utek came out for a visit, sat in my living room for 30 minutes, meeting my mom. My mother's from Larry's River, Nova Scotia. So I remember them getting a bit of a kick out of Larry's River.
Mm-hmm.
We went out for dinner. And at that point, I said, I'm going to give it a go. And guys, this is absolute honesty. I thought one of two things were going to happen. I'm going to fail out academically because I'm not very good, or I'm just not going to be good enough to play at university level. I mean, there's at some point where passion and love of the game doesn't sort of substitute for talent. I was 6 feet tall, 171 pounds, and I ran a 5 flat 40. And those aren't, and none of those numbers are very good, as you guys know. And I got on a plane, came out, and really found something that I could really hold on to.
And Chris, Chris, when you came in '87, your program became good. Bill, before Chris came, pre '87, around that '85 year, and even in the earlier 1980s, St. Mary's wasn't very good. I was a fan. I grew up. I had a father in the media, so I used to go watch all those games. I remember watching games at St. Mary's before they had turf, and they were known post 1973, pre 1987, more for their losing and mediocrity than they were for the winning. With all due respect to the great players who played there, was the fact that the team wasn't that strong the opportunity you needed to have a footing? Because if it was a really good team, they may not have looked at a kid from Burlington who didn't have much going on.
I thought that exact same thing, Paul. I actually said to people, I said, you know what, I might make the team because they're really not very good. I remember when I gave the speech, I was writing the speech for the team, '88 team that went in the Hall of Fame. I was doing some homework. I think we won 22 games the previous 10 years, leading up to '87. Of course, no playoff, there was no winning whatsoever. And I just thought, well, and I remember McLean's in '85, they used to do a preview of the season ahead, all the teams in the CIAU at the time. And Western was ranked number 1, and they had about a page and a half of content. And St. Mary's was ranked last in the preseason polls. And we literally had 2 lines. Firstly said, haven't won in 2.5 years and no reason to believe they're going to win this year. That was it. So that was the environment I was walking into.
You go ahead, Chris. I jumped in there, but I wanted to sneak that question.
I was just going to go back for a second and say Jerry Foster must have seen something in you when you played together in junior, and he must have really sold you well on Coach Utek for Coach Utek to come and visit you at your home. Like, he obviously didn't go visit everyone at their home. So you must have made an impression on Jerry and some of your junior teammates. I think, like, your junior career, you must have had some success with Burlington.
Yeah, it was funny. We were a bad team my first year, and we got much better the second year. And actually went to a playoff semifinal and played an incredible Ottawa Sooners team that ended up putting about 8 guys in the CIS like the following year.
They were very good back then. Yes, the Sooners.
McAvoy was the quarterback.
Andy McAvoy, yes.
And the 2 Tynes brothers were playing for them, Paul. So some folks
really?
Here at that time. Oh, they just rolled it up. But it was an interesting dynamic in that I was a receiver punter and punt returner. And then for the playoff game against the Sooners, we sort of blew it up a little bit. And Doug Trimble, our head coach, decided to play 4 of us both ways, including me playing safety in the game. And I had a good game on sort of both sides of the field, if you will. And I guess that convinced somebody that maybe I could play at the next level. It hadn't convinced me.
Well, junior football was pretty strong back then too, I remember, and Ottawa Sooners were very strong too. But I'm just gonna go a little thing here with our last episode. Bill was with Sonny Wolf at Acadia, and so it was an Acadia themed episode. So today I want to kind of do the same thing. I want to do a shout out to some St. Mary's teammates while having you on the show and get your comments or thoughts on some of these teammates. And before I start, I'll mention, in the near future, hopefully we'll have some of our old defensive teammates on the show. But for tonight, I'm going to just talk about some offensive guys because we don't have all night. So I'll throw some quick names at you here, and then we'll get your thoughts on it. So receivers, my 4 main receivers throughout my career were inside Brian Smith and Bill Scollard, and then outside Ian McDonald and Matt Nealon. A lot of people would say that was the best foursome in all of Canadian university football, and all four of you were different too. You know what I mean? You all had your different skills, which contributed, and all four of you, yeah, it was the four of you together was an awesome unit. And I remember like John Lucan, my first year, another great receiver with great hands, and then Anthony Williams. He was, as you know, like a running back, but by my fourth year, he played receiver. So there's a few receivers I'm going to mention quick. Running backs, you know, we had Phil Matzad, Jody Hubert, Sean Monge, a great running back. I said, I wish a running game's your quarterback's best friend. I wish he would have showed up a little earlier in the 80s because he was a great player. I'll finally mention the O-line quick to you. The center is Shane Doyle and Costa Nicolopoulos, Louis Olsacher, Mario Vanni, Greg Foran, Mike Korecki, and then Richard McLean, Randy McLeod, Scott Nuttall, Colin O'Donnell, some great offensive linemen. I guess my point of this is I want to give them all a quick shout out while we have you, a St. Mary's guy, on the show, and just your thoughts to some of those guys, starting first with the receivers that you played with, some of those names I just mentioned tonight.
Yeah, that was an impressive receiving core, because you're right. We had different skills, right? Like I was sort of a slow possession guy. Brian Smith was a big target and could run, so he's a tough matchup for defenses. Ian McDonald kind of breakaway speed, and Matt could do it all. So I think the biggest challenge there was you trying to get the ball to all of us and spread it,
make everybody happy. But you guys were selfless that way too. There was no one ever complaining to get the ball, which is hard to believe, but none of you were like that too. So it was that made it great too. And by the way, you keep saying you were slow, but I don't know how many long touchdowns you scored in your career. 60, 70-yard touchdowns. You were very quick. You could deke guys out too. So I don't know if you really did some guys run a slow 40, but they're a lot faster on the field. And we didn't mention Paul mentioned your punting and your punt return. You had great punt return skills. Did you start punt returning in junior or high school? How did you kind of find out you were pretty good at punt returning?
Well, I mean, we played for a terrible high school team. So if you could catch the ball, you were going to play all over the place. I was punt returner there. I was a punt returner in junior ball as well. I always thought I was out there more for my hands than for my punt return ability. But as we came on to St. Mary's, I remember asking Coach UTEC about, we had other explosive guys on punt who could punt return. Because again, I wasn't, overly fast. I wasn't going to break anything. But he actually said to me, I really trust you back there. And that's why I need you back there. And I'm like, okay, I'm back there.
I want to just a couple of things to add to Chris's list, and then I'll pivot to a question for you, Bill. You mentioned John Lucan. He was a giant in my neighborhood. I don't know him. I've met him a couple of times way back, but a huge athlete in the peninsula of Halifax growing up. Brian Smith, I remember going to a St. Mary's practice when I played high school football and watching Brian Smith. And Chris, you may have been the guy throwing the football. He'd catch the ball with one hand, his throwing hand, and then he'd take it and throw it back, and then catch it with his throwing hand. And he must have had hands the size of a banana bushel. It was such an interesting skill to watch. And I'll just, on a couple of names you mentioned as a trip down memory lane. Greg Foran played high school football with me at St. Pat's. He's a good lifelong friend. And Scott Nuttall, along with Steve Samara and a couple of other guys, is a huge Expos fan. So anytime I hear Scotty Nuttall's name, I think of the fact that he was one of my baseball friends working out of the tower back in the day. Love those names, Chris, going down memory lane. Bill, speaking of memory lane, I want to return to that theme. Coach UTEC, Larry UTEC, the iconic Coach UTEC with the snarly, growly look sometimes. He could be an intimidating person, but I grew to really like him and admire him. He was a smart man. He saw the world through intellectual eyes. His family and my family, his wife Sue, became good family friends. So I have huge admiration for him. But when I first met him, I don't mind telling people, he scared the crap out of me. There was something just football-esque intimidating about him. Starting with his presence in your living room, to being your coach, to being a mentor, to the presence you had in his life towards the end of his life when he was in poor health. What kind of a person was he in your life? When you think of Coach Utek and his influence on you, you think what?
Well, that's how much time do I have?
Yeah.
One, not that I was unique in this. I just loved Coach Utek. I just loved him right from day one. He was a very quiet guy. I remember sitting in the living room with my mom and him. My mother was knitting, she's very, very quiet. I'm quiet, and Coach was kind of it was just it was just tough to talk because no one was kind of doing any talking. And then we ended up going to the Keg for dinner, just him and I. And again, it was a little bit of working hard to kind of just get the conversation flowing, because I think there was two kind of introverts spending a bit of time together. But I really liked him. He came across as humble. I mean, also he's pitching a terrible program. Like we're sitting down there and he's got, we can do this. We got to do this. We got to add some people. We have one for a long time sort of thing. And I'm being drawn into it. But it's a tough. You can imagine it's a tough recruiting when Western's going in there saying, here, look at all the Vanier Cup rings we got. We're going to go get some more. Do you want to be part of it? But when we finished up that dinner, I came back and I remember telling Mom, I said, I really want to go. I really like him. And ended up going out there. And really from early on, I tell a story of us losing the first couple of games of the year when we should have won. Like we really dominated those games and lost on a did not calling a timeout on the 2-yard line with like 10 seconds to go, and then snapping the ball over my head. I was holding for a field goal that would have won the game for us, like from 21 yards or something, and we were 0-2. And I ended up going up to Coach's office on the Monday. And all I was thinking was, what am I doing? Like, I can't go up here and talk to him. I'm rookie. I'm happy to make the team. Rookies, shut your mouth and work hard. That's our role, kind of thing. But I just had to talk to him. So I went up there, and I won't give you the whole story, but basically I was going to tell him that I didn't think the team wanted to win, because after both those losses in the dressing room, there just didn't seem to be an overall feeling of, being upset. They were fairly happy coming close. And I'm like, what's going on here? So anyway, I went up there to talk to him, and I was real anxious about having the conversation. And I said to him, I said, finally, I said, Coach, I don't think this team wants to win. I was waiting to get blasted. Like, who the hell are you? Right? Who the heck am I to walk into his office, a rookie? And he said, I think you're right. Which was, again, not the expectation. I was, that was what I was going to hear. So he said, you're right. And he said, what are you going to do about that? And he was typing the whole time. What are you going to do about that? And I'm thinking, what am I going to do about that? What I'm a first year guy. There's CFL draft picks out there. What am I going to do? And after not answering for an extended period of time, what are you going to do about that? I brought you here and others to change that. And then we sat down for like a 2-hour conversation, talking about culture, talking about winning, talking about losing, talking about how things need to change, and he went chapter and verse. I mean, I should have taped it, because it was like I could be using those, those insights today. That started a relationship with him and I, because I would pop by his office. I don't know if I was bothering him or not, but apparently Sue told me after the fact he loved when I did that. And we would just talk about stuff, mostly about football, but not always. And when we talked about the football stuff, it was about culture, and it was about what do we need to do, and who do we need to. It was such a schooling for me in how to lead. And I've used that, in my career. Larry was a tough guy to get to know. Like, people would say he was a little bit aloof, a little bit. Well, he was shy. I mean, you could just tell he didn't have that. He's a little uncomfortable around people, as I was. And maybe we clicked on that piece. I remember I was moving around with the job at that point in Labatt, and I was coming back. We were going to be back in Halifax again. And I remember going in to see him. By that time, he was still working, but the ravages of ALS were starting to take hold. He could still walk, but it was with no shortage of struggles. And I went in there to visit with him, and I wanted to talk about him, and he wouldn't have it. He just, how's your family and how you doing? And and it was all about me. And that was so him to do that, to take the focus off himself, and never even mention his struggles. And it kept wanting to talk about me. And I just, he only had 50 years, but boy, he packed a whole bunch into him. And, I'm just a better person for knowing him. And I've drawn on him, in my, my 61 years of living to try to be better as he made me better.
I find I love hearing these stories. I didn't have the depth of relationship with Coach Utek that you two guys had and still have in your heart and soul. I remember as a very young journalist, I wasn't even a journalist. I was writing for the St. Mary's Journal newspaper, and I was doing a feature on Dave Sykes. Chris, this was after you left, and I called Coach Utek on the landline. I said, "Hey, can I do an interview with you?" He said, "Not now, but why don't you come to my house tomorrow morning?" I think he lived in Atlantic Street or Atlantic Avenue, right around the corner from St. Mary's. So he come to my house at 10 o'clock. So I go to his house at 10 o'clock. I'm kind of nervous. I got my notebook and I'm taking notes. And he answers the door in boxer shorts and a tank top undershirt. And it looked like he just rolled out of bed. And Coach Goddard was napping on the couch. It was a crazy scene. And I sat down like he had like a sectional coach. And I asked him questions. And at some point, the conversation pivoted to the geopolitical climate in French Indochina, pre-Vietnam, starting in 1954. And I was in a master class with an intellect who saw the world through intellectual eyes and through an intellectual lens that had nothing to do with my football perceptions of him. And I tell you, Bill, and I tell you, Chris, I realized I was dealing with an impressive piece of work. And I remember just being astounded by what this man knew about the geopolitical climate and other parts of the world at an academic level. And so I had a wonderful conversation with him about this, and I loved those kind of conversations. Not long after that, he became a public servant. He served in council. He was deputy mayor, and his career was on the way. And he became the kind of guy you name a street actor for his contributions. So, Bill, I like the fact he touched on that because he made contributions to the sport, clearly. He made contributions to the university, clearly. But the human being and the community servant and the kind and compassionate soul that he was are probably all of our lasting memories. I dare say, Chris, you probably have a similar perspective.
Oh, some of the comments you made, Bill, as far as your first time meeting with them and going out for dinner was the same feeling I had too. And he wasn't like the other coaches either, even the way he dressed, like Paul, you mentioned answering the door in his boxer shorts and that. But I remember him just with sweatpants on and rubber boots and stuff like that. And all the other coaches would wear their school attire. He would just wear whatever. And he was, he was just himself. He was very humble too. And I remember when I first met him too, I felt the same way. I just liked him. I said, I like him. He was a guy that you wanted to play for. And he did keep his distance from everyone. And everyone figured, oh, Chris is a quarterback. They must be really, we had a really good connection on the football field. On game day, we clicked. We seemed to be on the same page. But off the field, he kind of was at arm's length a bit and was hard to maybe like be too close with him. But maybe that's what he wanted it too as a coach, player coach. You don't want it to be too buddy or whatever. So he was a bit of an intimidating person too when you went into his office, like you said, Bill. Whether I was a rookie or a fourth year player, it was sometimes intimidating going in to see Coach Utek. But he had this thing about him that you liked him and everyone wanted to play for him. And I think that was the feeling everyone would say about playing a football player, playing for him as as your coach. He was a guy that you wanted to play for and win for sure.
Right.
And Bill, I want to jump to 1988. You beat Bishops in the Atlantic Bowl, if my memory serves me correct. Leroy Blue was on that team. Am I right in that memory? 1988. Yes. And Chris Flynn gets hit. He gets hurt, and he's not going to play in the Vanier Cup. Bill Scollard, fourth-year player, is a receiver. According to Bill Scollard, a slow receiver. He's a punter. He's a kick returner, punt returner, all kinds of good stuff. And at some point that week, I opened up the Chronicle Herald or the Mail Star or whatever paper I was reading, and I found out as the team was preparing in Ottawa to play in the Vanier Cup at Varsity Stadium, Bill Scollard, who was not a quarterback, was going to be a quarterback. Now, before we get to the fact that you went, I think, 27 for 47 passing, 296 yards, I think of what it was. Before we get to the impressive showing you brought us, from a fan's perspective, watching you do that, that experience doesn't compute for me. Take me through that. Did you see it coming? Did you throw passes during the regular season? Did you have any quarterbacking pedigree coming into what was an amazing assignment for a fourth-year receiver?
It's funny. I mean, it's 35 years ago. You're trying to remember all the details of that. I do remember that we didn't have a kind of a legitimate backup. And I remember, and Chris, you might want to jump in here. Coach put me in an exhibition game for about, I don't know, like 10 or 12 minutes. And I think I handed off a couple of times. I don't know if I threw the ball at all, kind of thing. And that was sort of that's the quarterback I played. Before that, it was, touch football back home kind of thing was the extent of the quarterbacking experience. And again, I think he put me in there, in case Chris has to leave for a couple of plays during the season, somebody can jump behind the center and take a few snaps. But I played no sort of quarterbacking role in the season going forward. I never got back behind the center again. So that was the end of the sort of whatever experiment that was. And it turned out to be somewhat helpful as it turned out.
I'll just mention that year, for some reason, we didn't really have a backup quarterback. Doug Smith was a defensive back, but he ended up sort of being my official backup later in the year, but he didn't really play, but at least he practiced. You practiced a little bit too in the exhibition game way at the beginning of the year, but I don't think you practiced at quarterback the whole rest of the year. I pretty well played most of the games. We weren't as dominant that year as far as like big blowouts, but yeah, we went 10-0. We won every game. The Atlantic Bowl, I ended up getting hurt, but back then I was able to talk myself back into the game, finished the game. I ended up having a pretty bad concussion and a hairline fracture, but even that week I practiced on Thursday even. And so it wasn't until Thursday night that I found out that they wouldn't let me play. That's a whole other story. But for tonight, you only found out you were playing Thursday night. So you had a practice on Friday, which is, as you and I know, is not even really a practice. Friday practices are just a walkthrough. So you didn't even really have a practice. And as far as in the game, I tell people this, and maybe you've thought of this, or maybe I've mentioned this to you before, but I remember the one advice I told you. I said, when in doubt, throw it to Matt. Matt Nealon was a great receiver, and you threw it to him a lot. But one key factor is Bill Scollard, the quarterback. If he would have had Bill Scollard, the slot back, you would have liked throwing to Bill Scollard. Bill, he was a pretty good receiver. If you would have had him at slot back, we might have actually won that game. So you playing quarterback was like Bill Scollard, the slot back, getting injured. You know what I mean? We lost me at quarterback, and we lost with slot back. So had you had yourself at slot back, we might have won that game. So that's one. And as a quarterback, it is actually amazing that you just did the practice Friday. Even taking the snaps during the game would be hard from the center. So I just want to ask you about your thoughts. I can hardly remember it either, but the pregame, like, what was it like that morning, waking up Saturday morning before the game, and how did that lead up to the game? How did that all go for you?
And let me share briefly, Paul, and to the audience. The reason why we didn't have a backup quarterback was because we had Chris Flynn as our starter. So picture us trying to recruit a quarterback, and the message is, and you're not going to start.
Yeah.
So that was real. That was absolutely real. Just briefly, I'm not sure everybody knows the story, but I did find out about it. We were getting on the bus Thursday night. Chris was playing. Chris, you got dinged up, but everything was kind of business as usual. Got on the bus. We're all dressed up nice because we were going to go to the hotel to get the Heck Creighton, your first trophy. And I'm on the bus. Coach Keith, God rest his soul, he weighs me over to talk to me about something, which wasn't abnormal. Came off the bus. We got to the back of the bus, and he said, so here's the deal. Chris has got a concussion. He can't play. You're the starting quarterback on Saturday. And I'm like, yeah, right. And
you think what? Like, what? I mean, do you get
shock.
The playbook out? Like, what do you do?
First of all, I think he's kidding. Coach Keith was fun, right? And I said, yeah, right. And he said, does it look like I'm laughing right now? So things got really serious. And he said to me, Chris is going to win the Heck Creighton. He's going to get up and announce it. And then we got some work to do in the next day or two. Don't tell anybody. Go back on the bus, and we'll take it from there. So I go back on the bus, and I'm like, I'm just staring straight ahead, right? Just trying to absorb that. I remember getting to the hotel, and it was a big banquet, a big banquet area in the hotel. My sister and brother-in-law, sister Janice and my brother-in-law Wilf were there, and I pulled them over and I said, "Hey, just so you know, keep it quiet." But I said, "Chris can't play on Saturday, and I got to play quarterback." And I can't, I joked with my sister because what Janice said to me was, "But you don't know how to play quarterback." Okay, fair.
I'll learn.
Yeah, I'll learn. So Chris gets up. Chris makes the announcement, and boy, I had to be 400 people there. Put pin drop, right? I mean, pin drop. That was like because Chris got up, said, "Can't play, concussion, can't go. Team's going to do great without me," and then he walked off the stage. Right? I remember getting into the. So we spilled out into this huge hotel area, a big escalator in the middle of it, and people are buzzing all over the place, of course, right? And then there was an announcement came over that said, "Would Bill Scollard and Doug Smith, the backup quarterback, please report to room 22 something something," which was Coach Utek's room. I remember going up the escalator and being chased by media to talk to Doug, I'm assuming, right? Anyway, we got up there, picked the elevator up, knock on Coach Utek's door. He comes in, and I remember Doug and I sit in one bed. It's a 2 double beds. Utek's right across from us. We're almost like knee to knee. And Coach says to Doug, "Doug, Bill's the starting quarterback on Saturday, and I need you to commit to helping him with whatever he needs to be successful." Band-Aid ripped right off, right? And Doug was gracious. He also pitched for the idea of can't lose Bill at receiver, so I think I should be the quarterback. I know the plays he doesn't, sort of thing. And I remember Coach said, "You know what, Doug, I agree with everything you just said, but Bill's a starting quarterback on Saturday. I need you to help him prepare. Can I count on you?" And he said, "Absolutely."
Amazing.
Yeah.
Before we get to the performance, and I wanna spend a couple of minutes talking about how you did in that game. Chris, you and I in a previous podcast talked about that injury. Hindsight being 2020, and with the caveat that I'm not a proponent for athletes to play hurt and take risk. But is there a universe in your mind that you explore where you say, "I should have played that damn game and I would have been fine"? Or were you clearly unable to play?
Wow, that's a pretty tough question. I was a skinny guy with no muscles back then, but I never got hurt. I always managed to elude defenders, and on that against Bishops, I kind of had a guy tackle me from behind, driving me into the ground, and then I got kind of speared from the front. So all the guys' weight driving me into the ground, the other guy spearing me. I actually had a huge black eye. Immediately, I had all blood in my eye. I could not see the scoreboard. This is the game against Bishops. I was out for about 15 minutes. I talked myself back into the game. I couldn't see the scoreboard the whole rest of the game. I had to ask people like what was the score, and I couldn't see the scoreboard. And then after the game, we won. It should have been an amazing night in Halifax, but I remember around 7:00 at night I had to go home on that Saturday night because I had such bad headaches. So I kind of knew something was wrong, but I definitely didn't think it was anything that bad. I actually finished the game and had a pretty good game. And then that week, I remember I had on the plane, I had my eyes started watering like from the pressure. I was getting bad headaches, and I had to wear sunglasses. I don't know if you know that, but I never wear sunglasses. I had to wear sunglasses all week because of the lights. But I still thought everything was okay. I didn't practice. I did a bunch of tests and CAT scans and everything. And I remember on the Thursday, I practiced. I went to practice. I still thought everything was okay. And then I went to do some tests. I almost feel like they tricked me. They're like, "Chris, everything's okay. You're going to be fine. You just want to go see the doctor and answer some questions." I answered very truthfully to the doctor. And then after the doctor's appointment was over, he said, "Sorry, Chris, you have a concussion. We detected you have a little hairline fracture over your head too, and it would be way too dangerous for you to play, and you can't play." And I started freaking out. I thought I was just going in for a little checkup. This is the Thursday afternoon, and Coach Utek was there. I was like crying. I was really upset, and I said, "Coach, I'm playing. Like, it's funny, like it's your head, but physically you're okay. You don't have a separated shoulder. You're perfectly fine." And Coach Utek said, "Chris, this university won't let you play. Like you can't play." And sometimes I wish it's upsetting even talking about it now, but sometimes I wish I would have played and threw 5 interceptions and lost than not play at all. You know what I mean? And as you know, Bill, you worked so hard to get to that point, to get to the Vanier Cup. We lost the year before, so we went 10-0 that year. We get to the Vanier Cup, and then you're not allowed to play like 2 days before the game. And I thought I was playing. I knew I had some headaches, but I didn't know how serious it was. If it happened today, there's no way I would have been allowed back in the Bishop's game in the Atlantic Bowl, but that was 30 years ago. But I guess they did a bunch of tests, and the test didn't come out very good for me, but they didn't, I don't know, they let me practice Thursday, so that confused me. So just bring it, you asked me that question tonight, it upsets me 30 years later, but basically the school would not let me play. It's easy for me to say I wish I would have played.
Yeah.
But who knows what would have happened in the game to me, I guess. But of course, I would say I wish I would have played for sure. It was the Vanier Cup, and it was the only game I ever missed at St. Mary's.
That's amazing. It's still unbelievable that happened, but it paved the way for, well, the team lost, but it was still a history-making performance by Bill. By the way, Bill, quick question. Was Greg Foran your center for that game in the 88?
I think it was Costa Nicolopoulos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was Greg's rookie year. I wasn't sure because I know he moved up and down the offensive line in his 5 years, so I wasn't sure where he played then. You had a sweet spot going in that game ago, though, Bill. How did you feel early? And at what point did you say to yourself, I've got something here? I mean, because you were competitive in that game for quite some time. Did it click right away, or was there a moment where you were thinking, I might actually be able to do this? We might actually win this championship.
I'll answer that by going back a little bit. I remember on the Friday, I was being interviewed by TSN, and I cannot. It beats me up. I can't remember the name of the guy who was interviewing me, but he was there forever, and he had curly hair, like really tight curls. If you could give me the name, I'll know it. But
Peter Watts, was it Peter Watts maybe, or
no, it wasn't Peter Watts. No. Anyway, no. Anyway, we're having the conversation. He interviews me. Interview's over, and maybe he was feeling I was a bit anxious, whatever. But he pulled me aside and said, "You know what, Bill? Here's the deal." He said, "Nobody's got any expectations of you in tomorrow's game. You throw 10 interceptions. It's, hey, never played quarterback before, right? But here's the deal: you got chosen by Coach Utek to play for a reason. You're obviously a leader on this team, and you've got some athletic ability, or he wouldn't have put you in the position." So he says, so just go play, have fun. And it kind of, I'm a worrier guy, but that kind of resonated with me. So, so we get into the game. And it's quite surreal. I remember we were in the lobby of the hotel early in the morning, and people are coming up, hey, you're gonna do great, tapping me on the shoulder. I was getting pretty anxious about Bill. Coach Robinson, Billy saw that and said, "You want to get out of here?" I said, "Yeah, let's get out of here." We went to a coffee shop and just chatted about some stuff, which really kind of calmed the nerves a little bit. And then, it really got back to varsity, got changed, got taped, and we were kind of walking on the field. So here we go. I mean, the first couple of drives, we were actually doing quite well, moving the ball up and down the field. We stalled on all the early drives. But I felt pretty comfortable. I was seeing some people that are open. The previous day, Billy and I had sat down and we talked about the plays that I was comfortable with and the plays I was less comfortable with. And we were able to sort of get a list that looked pretty good. A reduced package, what Chris could have done, but I felt pretty good with what we'd chosen to do. But Calgary got up early. They scored a couple of touchdowns. It was 18-1. Middle of the second quarter, so it was like, okay, now and Phil Matzat was my running back. He had a bad ankle,
he was injured.
So I didn't really have a great running game, and of course, being down 18-1, it looks like we're going to have to throw the ball. And then we went on a long drive in the last 4 or 5 minutes of that second quarter, and Matt made that ridiculous catch over his head when we were in a short corner. And it was 18, and when scored the touchdown, I get 18-8. And I remember coming off the field thinking, we can move the ball against these guys. I just got to stop making mistakes, if you will. And from then on, I mean, I kind of settled in. I was trying to read some defenses a little bit. I didn't want to get too far down the road on that one, but Billy was calling all the plays, so I just had to kind of just execute. I had a solid group of receivers, and yes, Matt was the guy I kept turning to when I needed him. But the other guys contributed as well. And I mean, we were in the thick of it, and I still remember it distinctly, driving down, scoring the touchdown, 2-point conversion, and we're down 31-23 with about 9 minutes to go. We're one converted touchdown down. I remember coming off the field really feeling good. I remember, and Chris, you came over to me after that one, and we had a bit of a chat. And you were just kind of continued to kind of pump me up, and and said, "Doing great, just keep going." The defense went 2 and out, right? I remember getting back in the huddle. We're on our 35, maybe 40-yard line, and I said, "Guys, we're going to walk this thing down the field again and tie this thing up." And on 2nd and 10, their DB made a great pick, one-handed interception, took it back 75 yards the other way, and that was kind of the end of it. But once the nervousness of the game was done, I could kind of just settle in, and the offensive line was giving lots of protection, and the receivers were catching, and I was making a few mistakes, but I was also making a few plays, and I'll say it, and I've said it 100 times before. Chris plays quarterback. I get to play receiver. We got big rings on our fingers today.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Wasn't the way it played out.
And as we jump ahead to 1989, did you throw any passes in '89 season? Was that Vanier Cup your one and done as a quarterback? Did they put you behind center at all in '89?
One and done.
One and done. So 89, I believe that was the year you guys lost to Western in the Atlantic Bowl, and the career for Bill Scollard was over from a university standpoint.
I'll just
walk off the. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just mention quick. Before the Western game against Acadia, we won pretty comfortably the playoff game, and both Bill and Brian Smith both got hurt in that playoff game. So the against Western, a great team, maybe the best team we ever played against. Both Bill and Brian dressed for the game, and they tried to play, and Bill even made a huge play at the end of the game, but you guys tried to play, but really weren't able to play most of the game. And had both of you been healthy, that might have been a different game too. So depth, I'll just quickly say that was one thing we kind of lacked a little bit, was depth at St. Mary's. Our starters were great, but those are two examples. Me getting hurt in '88, and you and Brian Smith getting hurt before the Western Atlantic Bowl in '89. We had two rookie inside receivers in there. So it didn't just hurt our passing game, it hurt our running game too, big time against Western. So that was a tough way. And Bill, you're such a warrior that your shoulder was hanging halfway down your arm, and you came back at the end of the Western game. You came back in the game and caught a screen pass and ran it for about 80 yards at the end of the game. So that's how I remember you ending your career with us, Bill.
And Bill, when your career ends and you walk off the field for the last time, Chris, your situation was different because you finished in 1990. We didn't know if you were coming back, and then you jumped to the Montreal Machine. So there was no feeling of finality to it. For Bill, when you walk off the field for the last time, you know it's over. Were you ready for new challenges, or is that a deeply sad moment for you? Like, what was the last walk off at Husky Stadium for you in your mind, your emotions?
I mean, with what I remember of it, I remember actually my sister was down again. Janice was down again, and her and I were walking off the field after, a disappointing loss. Because even, with the dynamics Chris talked about, I mean, we had a big comeback in the game, ended up losing, I think, by 5 in the game. I remember thinking I was disappointed for not just myself, but the whole team, and certainly Coach Utek, that we didn't win one. Right, like a guy like J.I. Albrecht had a column a little while later talking about sort of the career, Chris's career, and sort of the era that we just sort of finished up. And I remember him saying we probably had the best team in that 3-year window, 87, 88, 89, best team in Canada, and we didn't win it, which. I'd like to sit here and tell you that it doesn't bother me today, 35 years later. It bothers me today. I can't see the Vanier Cup trophy. That you see it at different times, obviously during the Vanier Cup week and stuff, where I don't have that 88 team should be on that trophy. And again, I really want we really wanted to win for Coach Utek.
Absolutely.
I mean, we just wanted him because he wanted it so much for us. He didn't care about personal accolades. He didn't care about recognition. He really shied away from it. But he just wanted us to win for us, and we wanted to win for him. And unfortunately, with a little bit of bad luck, because you got to have a little bit of good luck in those scenarios too. It just didn't pan out. But I was so grateful for my 5 years at St. Mary's, and there was such a growth opportunity for me. I painted the scenario of me showing up there thinking like this isn't going to last very long. And it turned into, in my wildest dreams, both team wise, individual wise, and growth wise. It was a wonderful 5 years for me. But it would have been nice to win one.
We're getting close to wrapping this up, Chris. Before I throw it back to you for maybe a final question for Bill, you mentioned the great J.I. Albrecht, which pivots me into a personal story. He passed away a few years ago. I actually called him on the phone 2 days before he died. Very good friend of my father. He'd come to our house for Christmas dinner every year. He'd stay overnight Christmas Eve and spend Christmas with us. That's how close he was to our family. One time my parents were away at Expo 86. He came to St. Pat's High School for parent-teacher meetings, subbed in for my parents. So he was that close. And hanging out with Mr. Albrecht, as I would call him, I can never call him J.I., a fascinating human being with the stories he told going back to managing the Harlem Globetrotters to being a general manager for NFL football teams and CFL teams, etc. He just was a really interesting character. And I remember those columns, and I remember the high praise he had for those teams. And I'm telling you, man, if J. Albrecht said you guys had the best team in the country for those 3 years, you guys had the best team in the country. He was that locked in. A controversial character in some people's opinions, but a wicked smart guy and a person who was very, very kind to me. Chris, I got a couple of closing thoughts in a minute, but you go ahead. You want to wrap this up with Bill from your perspective?
Yeah, one more thought or question from me, Bill, is like, when we played, like, everyone thought I was kind of the leader of the team, just being the quarterback, and hopefully I was a good leader, but I was more of a leader by example. To me, you were the leader on our team, and so I just want to ask you. I always felt you were a great leader, and you're still being a leader today. I just want to ask you about your leadership role at this time with St. Benedict and how that came about, and how are you doing in that role at this time?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Chris. My life took a bit of an unexpected turn. I would say I was 26 years with Labatt's and planning on 10 more of those years. And I'd grown up in a Catholic family, which kind of like going to church on Sundays, but there's really no sort of hard connection there. And I'd kind of rediscovered my faith about 10, 11 years ago. I got very active at St. Benedict Parish in Halifax, which is a really wonderful, active church. There's lots of things going on there. And I was fortunate enough to sort of, connect with that faith community. And completely unexpected, 6 years ago, I was offered a job there full time, which made no sense at the time because we had a single income family. The kids were going to school and mortgage payments and car payments. So I turned it down, but we were able to figure out something through Labatt's actually to allow that to happen. So I've been just past 6 years there, actually, or 5 years there. And I would say that, many of the skills I learned through football, on and off the field, and certainly many of the people, Larry Utek being one of them, Chris, you being another, who are great examples of great leaders, humble leaders, has certainly benefited me in my role. And you pull on that. You don't want to live too much in the past, but you're able to pull on those experiences to help direct and share examples of that. Leadership's it's a lifelong journey. Although some people say, well, you're a natural leader. Well, you still got to develop those skills. And, certainly on the field was a great opportunity to do that. When you got, mentors, some of our great coaches and some of the great players like yourself to help sort of develop and grow those skills. I was very proud. I remember my second year, that the team would vote the captains. So in my second year, again, I was just happy to be back, and we were hoping to see if we could sort of figure out how to win some football games. And the team voted me one of the captains. very humbled by that. Like I took that really, really seriously. These guys were looking to me to be a leader. I was a bit older, and that benefited me as well. But I was proud as heck to be one of the captains on that team. And Chris, thanks for those kind words. But it was an honor to be able to pull on that maroon and white jersey every Saturday and walk out on the field when the captains were there.
Well, let me jump in by saying this. Most people who know me know that Bill is a good friend of mine. Bill, you and I have had many, many visits over the past few years. I was very blessed. You invited me to come to your Saturday morning group one morning at the church pre-pandemic. We have to do that again, by the way. That was a really fun time for me. I enjoyed the fellowship. I enjoyed the environment. And I grew a deep appreciation for your connection to your church. I told you before, I don't throw the word role model around very much, but the role models in my life, Kevin Cameron, Mark Smith, Wayne Kirk, Bill Scollard, Dad. Like, there's a pretty short list, man. And what you did on the field is remarkable. The way you've carried yourself in the community is commendable. And the example you've provided for other people to follow. I'm 54 years old next month. I'm still looking to follow examples of people every time. You impressed me, and you impressed me with your role at the church. And I get jazzed listening to you talk about the church. I mean that. I could hear the passion and the commitment and the decency in your voice. So it's, I mentioned earlier, everyone has a story. You should be proud of yours. I love your story, Bill. It's very, very cool. You're a good friend. You're a treasure in the community. And I love this charted out pathway of your life at this stage. It's kind of neat to watch it. It's kind of neat to watch it all happen. And it makes for a pretty cool story.
Thank you for those words, Paul. They mean a lot.
Yeah, awesome. Very quickly, because we want to wrap this up. We don't want to keep you all night. 2012, St. Mary's Hall of Fame. You get the call, you think what? What's it like to be a Hall of Famer? Speaking as somebody who's not a Hall of Famer, I want to know, I always love to hear the Hall of Fame experience.
You know what? I was actually in the athletic director's office, Steve Sardi's office, and he shut the door and said, I got something to tell you. And he said, you're going in the Hall of Fame. And I mean, one of the jokes at church is, if someone's crying, it's probably Bill. I'm just an emotional guy. I kind of wear it on the sleeve, but I completely broke down. I said that school meant so much to me. And again, I stress, when I first arrived there, I did not have a lot going for me. I was struggling a whole lot, and I found something in the environment at St. Mary's that allowed me to sort of, to get some wings when I didn't have them before. I left there, much richer for the experience, and, friends for life. For them to, for the Hall of Fame committee to suggest that I should be up on that wall with all those people that Chris and I looked, and we first got there, all the 73 teams and all the iconic players that were hanging on the wall, for them to think that I deserved to be up on that wall too, was again humbling, such an incredible honor. And I'm just, like I said, it was St. Mary's. St. Mary's was not perfect when I arrived in '85, but it was perfect for me. And I'm grateful and for all who played a role in helping me grow to the person I've become and try to continue to be.
Well said. I can tell you, every time I go to the tower, it's not called the tower anymore, but every time I go to the upstairs lounge, I always go have a little visit with the Bill Scollard picture and the Chris Flynn picture and all of my friends. I have a lot of friends on that wall, and it's a pretty proud wall. It's a wall of fame, and it's a wall of acclaim as well. And by the way, my experience and Chris's experience with St. Mary is very similar to yours. It's a very special place for very special reasons. Let us wrap it up there. So, Bill, we thank you for joining us. Always good to catch up, and make sure you come back and see us again sometime, okay?
A real pleasure, guys. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chris. Great to see you.
That is awesome. So this is another episode of the Scramble podcast. We thank our guest, Bill Scollard, for joining us. For Chris Flynn, I'm Paul Hollingsworth. We will see you next time.